Hey everybody, what's going on? My name is Rob Payon, and welcome to the Proof of Talent podcast, the show where we talk about everything related to the career journey within the blockchain, crypto, and Web3 space. Today, we have a great episode. It is with Mitchell Hammer from Electric Capital. And in this conversation, myself and my colleague Remy, we talk with Mitchell about a variety of subjects when it comes down to what the team at Electric Capital is doing, how they differentiate themselves in a really crowded field, some of the ways that they're able to assist their portfolio companies, as well as some of the things that Mitchell sees some of their portfolio companies doing exceptionally well. In this episode, we'll also talk about Electric Capital's developer report, which, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting and coolest pieces of content put out by any VC fund in the crypto space at all. And so we'll dive into that, how that's used, and how you can use that too as a job seeker as well if you're thinking about new opportunities within the crypto space. Before we hop into this episode, if you are a leader at a crypto company, you are hiring, looking for talent to grow and scale your organization, please feel free to reach out to us at Proof of Talent. We're happy to help. I'll put links below in the YouTube and podcast descriptions. As well, if you are a job seeker, you're looking for your next role in crypto or your first role in the crypto space, happy to help you with that journey as well. Now, let's hop into that conversation with Mitchell Hammer from Electric Capital.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be on. Excited about it. Things have been great. It's been sort of a wild ride. I feel like I joined or at least accepted an offer to join Electric sort of during peak mania. And now obviously we've seen huge drawdown since then, and now we're back up and some volatility since then. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, as anyone who's been in crypto for any period of time knows it is.
What was that like for somebody like the first time? Because I'm always curious about that, because I joined crypto in like peak of 2018. I think it was a month after like the Pico top of like 20K Bitcoin in like February of 2018, I think it was. What was that like for you, kind of coming in when you joined the industry and then going through like a pretty gnarly, epic, like maybe the worst ever bear market we've had in the space?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's certainly disheartening on some level to see sort of prices just completely tanking. I think being surrounded by a team that has been through it before really helps sort of ground you and give you perspective about how serious it really is. I had also somewhat been paying attention to crypto during the prior boom and bust, so I at least had seen that this isn't completely alien to the asset class. But yeah, really having a team that you trust and can kind of confide in and build morale internally, even as all the mainstream publications are sort of spelling the end of crypto, I think really helps sort of focus you to just keep going forward and grinding.
I think people take for granted, honestly, like how valuable it is to like join a team that's in Web3 or crypto that's survived different cycles. So many people are so eager for those like fresh startups that are basically just getting their feet wet because there's a new bull market coming on. I guess talk to us a little bit more about your choice on joining Electric Capital and how that opportunity arose.
Yeah, so I was previously at Princeton's endowment, helping manage the venture and private equity portfolio there. Joined at a time sort of just by chance where actually a lot of crypto firms were starting to raise institutional capital. This was back in 2017. So Andreessen was starting to raise their first crypto fund. Pantera was raising like its first sizable venture vehicle. Paradigm was launching. Electric also launched around that time period too. So the endowment at that time was actually digging into crypto a little bit. A group of us was reading the Bitcoin white paper, Ethereum white paper, trying to understand what smart contracts are. And I didn't know at the time, but that really laid sort of the seed and the groundwork for my eventual transition into the space. So when I was looking for new opportunities, and a former coworker was like, "Hey, do you want to talk to Electric?" That groundwork was already there for me to sort of be primed to take the call. And then once I started to dig back into the space after sort of like a 3.5-year hiatus of not really paying attention, I was really amazed actually by how much the space had grown. By this time, DeFi summer had happened. Protocols were really moving real volume and value across smart contracts. NFTs were exploding and stablecoins had taken off. So I just got super excited, and meeting the team was sort of the final convincing I needed to be like, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do.
I don't know if I would, I guess, know or consider what you were doing previously, like the TradFi space, but how did your role with like an endowment at Princeton, how does the day-to-day there differ from what you do at Electric? What's kind of like some of the main differences there that you've seen, at least?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely consider Princeton's endowment TradFi, solely in the TradFi camp.
I didn't want to make any assumptions.
Yeah, it's very different. Being a capital allocator, like at an endowment or foundation, is really like the most abstract level of the capital stack. You see a very broad range of asset classes, but you allocate to managers who then allocate to companies. So you're pretty far removed from like the actual things being built and the actual work being done. And being at Electric is obviously one step closer to the actual like operating. So that's been a huge difference in terms of like what that means for my day to day, as well as just developing like expertise. Like you really get to get more into the weeds at a venture firm than at an endowment. And obviously the pace is different too. Princeton's it's older than the country, a 270 plus year organization. With lots of money and sort of the luxury of time to make decisions. And that's less true for sure in venture.
I think it's also important to highlight too, like your experience at university. I think a lot of people are going to college, getting a degree that they're not using, but it sounds like your experience there, you were networking, getting involved, being very hands-on, is a great example for other students that might be listening. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and like getting to the fund and like what you were doing while you're at college?
Yeah, so I was an English major back in college, so I'm pretty far from what I did academically. Um, I think really the advice I would have for people in college now who are students and thinking about what they want to do with their life is just gravitate towards things that are interesting to you, and that will probably lead to opportunities if you're engaging with a field that you're excited about and actually care about. Um, for me, I studied English because that's just what I like to do academically. I love reading. I love writing. Fiction is sort of my academic jam. But then when I started looking out at the real world, I was thinking about ways that what you learn in that degree can sort of apply to broader fields. And I think if you're sort of like a smart person who's generally curious, you'll figure out ways to find what your degree is and sort of apply it to fields that seem orthogonal at first, but where you can still be valuable.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I think it's something too. Like when we get asked a lot from different people in other areas of, I guess, other sectors that are interested in getting into crypto or working in Web3. And they don't necessarily, especially if they're non-engineers, they don't kind of have what they would view as maybe like a logical transition into the space. And so hearing that, even from your background, going from writing and that sort of thing to an investment fund, essentially, like having that kind of transition and being able to do that, I think is a really kind of interesting just thought for some folks. I'm curious too, as like on the kind of TradFi to crypto side of the house, having made that transition yourself successfully, what would you say to somebody who might be working? It could be, at an endowment fund, it could be working on Wall Street. Like, what advice would you have for somebody that is in that maybe position right now that would be potentially interested in making the move into crypto, if they are either having trouble conceptualizing that move or just making that jump in general?
Yeah, I think getting clear about why you're interested in crypto is probably the first step. Like, what is exciting to you about it? Do you really care about digital communities? Are you excited about banking the unbanked and expanding financial access? Or do you really care about privacy? Like, whatever it is that's exciting to you about crypto, I think identifying that first is probably the right starting point. And from there, you can kind of think about like, okay, within that part of crypto, like, why does that excite me, and what what can I add to that space, and that will sort of serve as like a guideline for where to go. And then from there, just really talking to as many people in the space and trying to learn as much, I think is important. I've talked to candidates who say they're interested in crypto, but after a few questions, it becomes pretty clear they're not super deep. Like maybe they read some headlines, and actually doing the homework of like figuring out what it is that you say you're interested in is important. But there's space for everyone, I think, if you can figure out like where to find your niche. I mean, as an English major, like not only crypto, but in the startup world writ large, like narratives are super important, right? So being able to like identify narratives, craft narratives, like that might not be something that you think is important or that is necessarily a straight through line to crypto, but you can definitely find a way to add value through that.
It's funny too, because I think like what you said, I totally agree with, like, especially when you're talking about people saying they're interested in the space and then going like 1, 2, 3 steps deeper and they just don't have that beyond like basic level. And I also agree with what you're saying, just as far as having that specific element of the space. I feel like there are obviously a lot of generalists or people that have a very broad range of knowledge, but for the most part, at least like for me personally, I really like DeFi. It is not sexy or in favor right now at all, but like that's the use case that I care about the most. I don't care about NFTs really. AI, I like AI, but like I'm not super into that intersection right now. And so I feel like there are just finding that niche that you really enjoy, and whether or not that's in favor or not doesn't really matter, but just being able to speak about that at a greater depth, I feel like is really important, especially if you are looking for an opportunity or even just like networking in the space when you just know more about 2 words of like blockchain and crypto.
Yeah,
totally. I think even building off of that too, right? Like once you identify your niche, then like there's specific communities that you can go network within that can lead you to those opportunities. And it sounds like that's exactly what you were doing with the fun side of the house. But yeah, that's super interesting point. It's like it's a process getting into the space. You can't just overnight say, "Oh, I want to work in crypto." It's like, dude, like this is a whole industry. There's like 20 different verticals. You got to know what exactly you're wanting to do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, the space has grown so much. There is really, it's too much to really say you're interested in all of it. Obviously, broadly you can be, but really honing what actually attracts you to, I think, is important.
One of the things. Oh, sorry, you got it, Remy.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's your role at Electric Capital? I know you've now been with the team for about 3 years, and kind of what's your role and how's that evolved?
Yeah, it's crazy to me. It's been 3 years already. In some ways, it feels shorter, in other ways, longer. But my role has shifted a little bit over time. So when I first joined Electric, there was, I think, around 8 people on the team. So everyone was basically doing a little bit of everything. My role, especially, was very generalist. I was writing investor quarterly letters, leading hiring efforts, helping with sort of ad hoc SPVs we're raising, validating later stage opportunities we had at the time. Even pitching in on our annual developer report, like really the whole gamut of the firm and what we did. But the team is much different now. So we're up to around 30 people. And as we've ramped up, my role has also become a little bit more circumscribed and focused. Still, in essence, a generalist. Like I'm still leading our hiring efforts, still help with investor letters and content for the firm, but spending more and more time on sort of investment research than I was before, as other responsibilities have sort of been offloaded, and in particular within the NFT space and to layer 2 ecosystems as well.
That's great. And I think definitely want to dive into some more of the things around your work with portfolio companies and hiring and things of that nature. But one question I actually have, based upon one thing you just mentioned, but the Electric Developer Report, which I think is probably one of the coolest pieces of content that any crypto VC firm puts out. And I mean, I've had Proof down for the past 5 years. I think I put it in Slack to every single year, because I think it's just like kind of mandatory reading, especially for a company that recruits technical talent within the space. I would love to know maybe a little bit more about like, and maybe you were around when that started or at some point in time, but like, how did that kind of come about and proliferate as such a, I think, like really unique and awesome piece of content that your team puts out?
Yeah, first, thank you for the kind words. We definitely appreciate people finding value in it. Um, it started before my time. I think 2019 was the first one. And it really stemmed from the idea that developers are a leading indicator of value creation. For anything to exist in the space, you need to have some baseline of developers building, and that should, in the long run, accrue value to the space and to the specific chains. Over time, it's evolved a lot. The crypto space has evolved a lot, and we're trying to always iterate and expand and keep up with it. So this past year was the first year we really explored like sort of the multi-chain thesis and narrative, and so much has become multi-chain in crypto that we really had to rework significant parts of the developer report. Yeah, and then the other idea at its genesis was to open source it, to really play into the ethos of crypto, which the firm tries to espouse, of building in public and having these public goods for people in the ecosystem to learn from and benefit from, and sort of figure out their next moves as well based on the data that we surface.
Were there any trends in your guys' recent support report that were most surprising for you?
A few. One is seeing how much multi-chain really has expanded was definitely eye-opening. Being able to actually like plot it on charts and see it visually, I think is much different than sort of like getting the qualitative sense that more things are becoming multi-chain. And then second, the developer geography data that we released is also somewhat surprising to me. Obviously the US has been less than friendly to crypto in many ways on the regulatory front, but really being able to quantify the impact that that's had on developers building in the US and the share of developers in crypto that the US has, it is much more impactful, right? To see like the drop from like 40% share down to like something like 20% today. I mean, that's like real impact, and has real repercussions as the crypto space grows if the US isn't able to keep those jobs and those projects on shore.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. Literally, I think 10 minutes before we hopped on this call, the SEC just sued Consensus, Lido, and Rocket Pool. So reiterating that thought process. But one thing I'm curious about, because I think like there's a ton of information that people can, and if you haven't, I'll put a link to this year's developer report in the podcast and YouTube notes as well, because 100% worth the read. But if you are a job seeker, I think obviously engineering, but I think even non-technical people can take a lot out of it. Like, would you have any recommendations as to how somebody interested in the space could like look at that report and maybe take some good information from that to make some educated moves about their career, really?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I haven't actually thought about the data in that way, but I think you certainly could. For starters, seeing which ecosystems are growing or growing relative to each other is certainly interesting from like a candidate's perspective, I would think. That will kind of help steer you towards projects that have momentum, that probably have staying power, and then you can sort of dive into the projects building on top of those chains to find something that really resonates with you. So that's probably where I would start on that. And then actually in the coming weeks, like next week or the week after, we'll be releasing an update. So there'll be fresh data to dig into for anyone seeking to use it that way.
Nice. I think, yeah, you mentioned a few points back too, like the narratives, being able to track those, using that as leverage to find the next position, understanding the right skills you need to start developing. So yeah, if you're listening, definitely stay tuned. Some alpha that just came out here a couple of weeks from now, new update on the report. So yeah, it's going to be awesome.
As far as your work goes with portfolio companies, and I think that was an interesting point that you said too about going from the endowment to obviously being a little bit closer to those companies with Electric. When you're working with those portfolio companies, is there anything that you see in particular that they may struggle with, or that they're constantly asking for support with when it comes down to maybe growing their teams, whether it's on the hiring end or just infrastructure, whatever it might be? I'm curious on that front if you see any common requests there.
Yeah, hiring is certainly a common request for help on hiring. How to approach it, how to source candidates, like how to really set up a sustainable process. I think like the number one thing that I would recommend for founders is just doing some upfront homework in advance on the front end, which will really make the hiring process so much smoother and save time in the long run. I mean, we've run into this problem internally where you realize partway through a process, you thought you were looking for X, but really you want Y. And then you have to go back to square one to really try to source for this new type of role that you actually need. And it saves so much time to actually just start by sitting down with key stakeholders, getting crystal clear on like what it is you need and what type of person fills those gaps. That starts typically with the JD, but once you have the JD, I think actually sitting down with like a slate of like 5 to 10 candidates that you would love to have for this role, and using that to calibrate as a team is super helpful. Like asking like, okay, what do we like about this profile? What don't we like? What's missing? And that can really help you hone either gaps in the JD, things that you actually can strip out of the JD because you don't actually need it, and help you get like a crisper idea of like the actual candidate you're looking for with like some concrete examples of like, oh, this would be like an A+ candidate we would love to hire.
What are the challenges or the founders in your guys' ecosystem having when it comes to hiring as well?
Yeah, I mean, finding good talent is hard, right? And often the best talent has to be sort of convinced to come over, and that takes time. I think remembering that filling a seat quickly just for the sake of filling it is not the best approach. That really trying to build sort of like a strong long-term team does take time, is worth keeping in mind, and helps set up a company for success in the long term. Like it takes time to onboard someone, right? And if you're constantly onboarding people because they're not working out and trying to fill prior hires that failed, that actually takes more time than just trying to find the right candidate up front. And finding pockets of talent that resonate with what your company is looking for and might over index to people who are good fits is also helpful. So if you're looking for data scientists, for example, with experience in crypto, you might try to mine Flipside or Dune or some of the other data providers in the space and like see who's building that either in their free time or as a full-time job and start trying to drill in there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something we try and do now internally as well, or like have. But I think it's increasingly important within the crypto space is going where the talent is, because I think that there is like in the traditional recruiting world, it's you can just kind of pop on LinkedIn and do your thing, and that might be good enough. And now the talent, especially the technical talent, does not need to be on LinkedIn in many cases, nor do they want to be, and they don't have to be. And so whether it's living in GitHub or like you mentioned, some of the kind of analytics platforms like Dune or Farsighted, or some of the other alternatives there, or even like thinking about Farcaster and probably like a good amount of the Solidity devs being on there, spending time there versus LinkedIn. It seems like it's like you kind of have to find those sub pockets of where these people are if you actually want to be able to successfully communicate with them and have some type of good outreach that kind of meets their needs and expectations as well.
Yeah, totally.
When thinking just about like the portfolio companies you've seen growing really well in this space, I mean, even just getting beyond like the hiring front, like what have you seen that the portfolio companies that you've worked with, that they've done really well, and just in terms of execution to maybe grow at a faster rate than some of the other ones that you've worked with internally or just externally as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. Baz on our team is like the absolute best person to talk about for this. So you can find her on Twitter. Anyone who's curious more about this, she's like a total badass HR leader at Meta and WhatsApp. Has so much good advice on how to scale an org on the right way. I think from my experience, like the orgs that can scale well and scale quickly are ones that sort of establish a strong culture early on, such that that sort of permeates as the organization scales. So, companies go from everyone being able to sit around the same table, where it's really easy to all be on the same page and have a strong culture, to that no longer being possible. And so setting up the right culture early, I think, helps as you scale. And that relies upon like making the right hires early, which is especially early, when we're talking to portfolio companies and founders that we partner with who are looking to scale up their teams. We really emphasize sort of like making sure you're finding not only the right hire from a technical standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint, so they can kind of be evangelists of your culture as the company scales. Crypto, of course, has some unique challenges on that front, given a lot of companies are distributed. More people work remotely. A lot of people may never meet or work in the same office. So finding ways to sort of push out your culture virtually, I think, is critical.
How have you done that at Electric? Because I know you grew at 8 and now you're at 30 or so. Like, is that something you've kind of seen happen, and I'm sure tried to apply internally as well?
Yeah, it's definitely something we've been cognizant of as we've scaled the team. Again, I mean, it sounds a little bit like trite, but just hiring the right people makes it so much easier to do that. During the hiring process, we really put so much emphasis on making sure people are cultural fits, which is like such a squishy term, but really means like, are these people sort of mission aligned for like what Electric is and what we hope to be doing over the next year, the next 2 years, the next 5 years. And maintaining the culture as we've grown has become so much easier because of the fact that we've had that sort of litmus test as we've added people to the team, and made sure that we sort of all share the same values, the same aspirations for the firm. And there's little things we do too, in terms of like, we have in New York an SF office. We try to have people come in at least a few times a week to build rapport. We all get together a few times a year as a full team to make sure that we have that camaraderie, and people aren't just little boxes on a screen to each other. And that also helps build and maintain the culture, I think.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, you touch on culture, and then also just like the importance of mission and how that can drive and attract the right talent. What would you say is, you mentioned next couple of years with Electric, what is kind of the mission that you guys are on right now?
Yeah, I think the long-term goal is to really build Electric into a top venture brand, with enduring value, and enduring value to founders and builders. So that means right now specifically, trying to be a top crypto brand. As crypto continues to expand, I think you'll start to see a time where it's similar to like mobile and traditional venture. You used to have firms that were mobile focused. Now, obviously, that doesn't really make sense to be mobile focused, because everything has to have a mobile angle and strategy in Web 2. And I think in the crypto space, we'll see that too. Crypto will become so integrated in everything that we'll be able to ascend from just being thought of as a crypto firm to just a top venture firm overall, and continue to hopefully be a great partner for founders, whatever they're building.
One of the things you said earlier, talking about the speed at which crypto venture, and I'm sure just venture in general, but crypto venture moves, and I've heard this, especially maybe 6 months ago. I feel like a common complaint I saw on Twitter was VCs in the space talking about how fast deals are moving when the market was super crazy, and how if you didn't move on a deal like that day, it was gone the next day. And so I'm curious a little bit about just how Electric differentiates itself, and I think this is, I'm sure everybody has their own kind of individual answer, maybe even at the firm itself, but like how your team might differentiate itself when a company is looking for maybe support, portfolio support from it, and investment from Electric.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's certainly true that during the hottest periods in the market, there's a lot of competition and things can move quickly. And I think we work hard every day, regardless of bull or bear market, to sort of establish our brand as a technical venture firm that can really be a partner to founders in the weeds. So over half of our team has some sort of technical design or product background. They've shipped products, they have expertise, they can really get into the weeds. We can run nodes, we can look through code, and we can be like true partners to founders in what's a very technical space. And that's been a very intentional way that the firm has been built. Sort of all stems from, we've all heard at this point, like software is eating the world. If you believe that, crypto in some ways can be viewed as software eating money in capital markets. And Avichal and Curtis, the co-founders of the firm, back when they founded it, sort of had this thesis that to build the next gen VC firm that's going to be successful for the next decade plus, you really should embed software and engineering into the firm itself very deeply. And that reflects how we've built the team. So we don't have, wide swaths of analysts, associates, or principals. We've hired mostly engineers that have experience building product, that understand the code, that understand how these products work, and can grow into investors. So we really think that angle helps differentiate us in the market. And then in terms of actually when we're trying to convince founders to allow us to invest in them, we try to help that shine through. So whatever it is that they need expertise from, we can connect them with people on the team that hopefully can speak to how we could help them in the long term if we were to partner with them.
That's definitely a huge differentiator. I made a LinkedIn post, I think last week, that we've had like 4 to 5 requests from VC firms looking for technical operating partners, exactly like people that can dig into the code, do technical due diligence. So it's cool that you guys have intentionally set that up from the beginning, because I think a lot of people are kind of on their like toes right now trying to go and find those people, and it's super hard.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Curtis and Avichal, I think, had great foresight, and especially in crypto, where you need to do things like run nodes, or you need to like transact on chain, and all of this is pretty hard to do in a way that's compliant and has good OPSEC if you don't have technical background or training.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like unless you're probably on the company side raising capital or on the venture side, but the whole industry has this like interesting perception around VCs that may be skewed in one way or another. But it's funny because like it is such a competitive market, or at least from my understanding, it is like for the top deals, or for the deals that it seems like people really the funds really want to participate in. Like you really have to differentiate yourself, and writing a check in 2024 is just not enough. You have to have all these like really strong teams, and have a really top technical talent internally, and all these other kind of components, and seeing how each fund has been able to, or attempting to, differentiate itself is really interesting. And even going to the content point with the developer report, like that's something to me, like anytime I think of electric, I think of like and maybe that's intentional, maybe that's not, but like that's one of the first things I think of when I think about your firm is like they have their shit together on the technical side, because they put this report out once a year, and it just shows like a lot of expertise and care, at least to me, so as an outside observer.
Yeah, no, definitely intentional there. And part of the reason we release it publicly as well is for people to see sort of the work that we do, the expertise that we have, the experience we have with sort of data scraping and munging, and then also like building and analyzing the report itself. And we've added to that suite too. So we've released CodeSlaw, which is a smart contract search that developers can use to pull up contracts on chain and sort of see how they're built, or search for specific functions and see how they're used. And we've also built NFT Pulse, which we released earlier this year, which is like an NFT marketplace stats site that shows top marketplaces, revenue, royalties, traders, a whole bunch of stuff. And now that we have the team, as we've grown, we have a lot of future products and features that we have spec'd out. So stay tuned.
Nice. So are NFTs coming back?
I certainly think so. Yes, I'm not sure if we'll see them in the same instantiation as we did in 2021, 2022. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, uh, NFTs like fungible tokens are really just token standard and have some extremely powerful properties and unique properties that I think make sense for certain assets on chain. So I think as we see more assets come on chain next cycle, a decent amount of them will be encoded as NFTs. We'll move beyond sort of just the PFP and art piece into sort of the more expansive application for NFTs, which is things like gamings, it's things like real world assets. And yeah, I don't think they're going away anytime soon.
Are there any topics or subsectors of the industry, whether it's NFTs or anything else like that, you have just seen over the past year that you're really excited about for the rest of the year with? I'm curious, like with all the stuff that comes across your desk, what you're most passionate about at this moment when it comes to this space?
Yeah, NFTs is certainly one. I think I've been digging into specifically like NFT financialization protocols, so things like lending, derivatives, other products that you can build on top of NFTs once they come on chain. And I think as we see more assets migrate on chain, we'll really see like what the right mechanisms are for those types of financial activities and like what protocols need to be created to support the new assets. So that's one space I'm really excited about. I think consumer crypto too is something to watch over the next few years. There's been a ton of work put into making the user experience in crypto better, because it was, as anyone who's been in crypto for a while knows, it's very tough compared to sort of the WhatsApp and the Uber and the Airbnb experience that we have now of just logging onto your phone and clicking very easily and having things transact immediately. Um, but now we have embedded wallets. Layer twos have made things much cheaper, and it's just so much cheaper and better and faster to use crypto today, that I think we're about to have like real consumer apps at scale. And you've already excuse me, you've already started to see some experience on this front, right? There's like Friendtech, Farcaster is starting to gain traction. You have Fantasy Top that's been taking off. And I think over the next few years, you'll only see sort of the crypto app space continue to grow now that the user experience is up to snuff for quote unquote normies to come online.
Mm. Yeah, great to hear consumers back up and up because yeah, I mean we focus a lot on infra, right? That's never going to slow down, I think, and there's probably about a L1 or L2 chain launching every day. But definitely great to hear the consumer facing stuff is up. Yeah, I mean, any like final pieces of advice, and I'll kind of angle this towards candidates trying to get into Web3.
Yeah, I would just echo mostly what I said before. Really spend some time thinking about what it is you want to do, and what excites you, um, and that will lead to success ultimately. I think if you're just finding a space where you're happy to grind and do so for several years, and that will bring you joy, like that's going to be more successful than sort of just blindly applying to hundreds of jobs because you want to get into crypto. Really spend some time thinking of your narrative and your brand, and what you have to bring to the table, and make sure that that's communicated in a way that's easy for people to digest. So, on your resume, tailor it for the job. Make sure it's streamlined so people can sort of understand what you did, why you did it, and the outcomes just by glancing at it for a few minutes. You don't want to make any hiring manager work for that information. You want to offer it up to them as easily as possible.
Yeah, I think it's really, really solid advice. Just like it's so evident when people are passionate in this space. And I think that like, the people that have the most success are I think this is an industry where like you can actually follow your own passions and make a living doing it, and I think that's pretty cool in and of itself. But it's really evident when people are able to do that. So I think it's really, really great advice. I guess to finish off, where if people are interested in Electric Capital, where can people go to find you or more information on Electric Capital and maybe even that report that's coming out in a few weeks?
Yeah, for sure. So if you go to our website, electriccapital.com, we'll have like a little resources tab up on the top ribbon. You can click that and find blog posts we've written, podcasts, learn more about the firm there. You'll also find our job board, which has both our jobs, but also jobs from across our portfolio. So you can definitely dig in there and see if any of them speak to you. And feel free to ping me on Twitter if you want, if you think you're a great fit for us or for another portfolio company, and you can take it from there. And then on the developer report side, we have a site called developerreport.com where we'll push the update to, and there'll probably be a tweet storm and blog post as well that we'll push out.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining the pod. Like, great information, ton of knowledge, and excited just to continue following the journey at Electric Capital.